I'm Jamaica Piper, and today I will be covering how to use NotebookLM effectively. This is basically focusing more on tips for organizing the information if you are using NotebookLM. With that said, let's get started. Okay, the first thing I want to talk about is what are you actually putting into the NotebookLM? Or rather, what is the purpose of that textual corpus that you are building? So I kind of create this little graphic here. So essentially, you're either looking at broad discovery when you're looking at multiple source texts and you're trying to figure out, okay, what is the direction I'm going to take my research or investigation forwards in? Or maybe I already kind of know, and so what I'm really looking at is more of a narrowly defined corpus where everything is related to this one issue, topic, or problem, and I'm trying to make sense of, okay, across these different viewpoints on this issue or topic, what are some of the consistencies? So either or, um, when we are organizing our textual corpus, we want to make sure that we're also keeping things in a balance. So that is when we start doing more of like, so after the analysis is produced, that we are, doing a source check, if you will, because at the end of any source or synthesis that's produced within the NotebookLM, it'll link back to the particular source that it's come from. So we want to actually click on those sources to, one, verify that it is actually citing the appropriate source there, that it did pull that information from there. But we also want to sort of start to look at and see, like, okay, what is the overall prevalence of some of the sources that are being cited? So for example, maybe you have like 6 sources in your pool, or maybe you have like 10 in your pool, but for some reason it's only citing 5, or it's overwhelmingly only citing those 5 of those 10 sources. You want to make sure that you're paying attention to that, and then that you're directing it, if need be, to say, hey, you've already pulled for these 5, but what about these other ones over here? That will be one of the first things that you can do, again, with the verification and checks and balances. Okay, now let's talk about information gathering piece. So you've gathered the information. Now this is more focusing on, I guess, the output is a better way to say this. So NotebookLM is great at, again, it's great at summarizing. All AIs to some extent are really good for summarization. Summarization is not the same thing as synthesis. So summarization, again, focuses on the key points, whereas synthesis is where you, as the human, are responsible for the development of the logic that might connect multiple disparate sources. So I want us to have that kind of key understanding about the limitations of what is generated. No matter how plausible it seems, we as the human in the loop still must go and verify, okay, here's not only like I was saying on the previous slide, the source accuracy and the prevalence of the sources, but also making sure that, like, okay, this doesn't maybe make sense to put in conversation with this individual. This might make better sense with this other individual. That's what we're supposed to be able to do as people who should also be familiar with the research that we're putting in there into the NotebookLM system. So I have my little example here to kind of show you what I mean. So I just use kind of 4 sources, and you see this is what it kind of looks like initially for those of you that have not tried playing with NotebookLM. What I also want to say, just as a secondary reminder, our textual corpus can be articles, it can be other stuff online. For some of us, we also might be trying to use this to do some of the analysis of qualitative data. So I just want to make sure we're all aware that there's a catch-22 to using it for your data analysis piece, and that is you want to make sure that, because it's not necessarily secured for the level that your data might need. So just be aware of that. If I'm not telling you to use it, I'm not telling you not to use it, I just want you to be aware of it. The other thing I want you to be aware of is if your institution doesn't have if you don't have an institutional license for that edition of the NotebookLM, it's free game, essentially to be retained and retrained on within Google. So I just want you to be aware of that. But that's it. This is an example of what a synthesis looks like. As you can see here, this is more kind of in that first vein where it's trying to make sense of all the themes. So to me, this is a very broad and vague thing. But I, as a human, would then need to go and ask some follow-up questions if I want to tease out the nuance. And so this is a refining strategy. So the iterative questioning can be a refining strategy. As you can see here, everything that I really want as a researcher is going to be in the betwixt and between of these sort of broad thematic overviews. And so for me, I pose this question, and the question I pose is, why is the concept of Black joy central to the underpinning of Afrofuturist feminism? So it pulled together, and again, it's still kind of chunking thematically here, but it's trying to explain a little bit more about the theme, the thematic theme, and how it kind of, what it sees as it connects to my larger question. So this is a good refining point. Now, the other thing, so once you've kind of refined it, and again, this is meant to be just a kind of quick example, there's a lot you can do with NotebookLM to deepen your understanding and to represent information. So I wanted to highlight first that NotebookLM has a whole little studio of different tools, like you can do mind maps, make slide decks or make infographics. This is particularly interesting if you're trying to visualize, again, a theory that you're trying to create. So here's kind of my theoretical theory here using my example. And so I just wanted to share that as something you can do and that can be useful for helping you process and to understand, as you're building towards an argument, what it is that you're arguing and what that might look like. So that's kind of my tips and thoughts about how you might sort of use NotebookLM and strategies for doing it a little bit more effectively. One second. Alrighty, and that wraps up my presentation. I'm Jamaica Piper, Education Humanities Librarian. If you have any questions, you can contact me. All right, talk to you later.